Hello there, listeners. It's Laura Yarbrough-Lloyd, your host of A Flair for VIP Events, here with an episode in the Iconic Events Series, where we explore the world of truly unforgettable, bold, and iconic events and the people who bring them to life. Today, I'm excited to have Cat Kevern in this series. Cat Kevern is an events industry stalwart, marketing expert, champion of women, and entrepreneur. With a decade of events experience behind her, Cat is the founder of Electric Cat, a B2B marketing agency serving event suppliers and organizers, and director of NOWI, the Network of Women in Events. She's a passionate advocate for diversity and inclusion in the events industry, with a particular focus on women's experiences. Cat is a seasoned keynote and panel speaker on a vast range of topics, from DEI, entrepreneurship, marketing, and building a brand, and the power of networking. In this episode, we're diving into the Olympics, specifically the Summer Olympics in Paris in 2024. We're talking all things major events, what it's like to work at the Olympics and how to get involved, favorite and least favorite things of a multi-week event, and career paths, and even a little bit about festivals. So get ready for some amazing insights, practical advice on top event skills and how to work at the Olympics. And like I said, a little bit of insight in what it's like to work at festivals. So I'm really excited to get Cat on this episode. Welcome to the Iconic Events Series, a special segment of A Flair for VIP Events. I'm Laura Yarbrough-Lloyd, and in this series, I sit down with event professionals from rising talent to industry leaders who've worked behind the scenes at some of the world's most iconic events, like global sporting events and red carpet premieres. You'll hear firsthand what it's like to work at these events, the career moves that got them there, and the insider lessons you won't find anywhere else. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up your event career, this series will help you step into your iconic events era. Hello, Kat, and welcome to the Iconic Events Series. I've given your official bio in the introduction, but would you like to introduce yourself in your own words?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. My name is Cat Kevern. My background lies within event freelancing. So I've been in and around the events industry for the last 10 years. And although now I run a marketing agency that specializes in B2B marketing for event suppliers and event agencies, I have still been dabbling in a lot of freelance projects over the last couple of years.
Amazing. So multifaceted. I mean, I know you, so I follow you, and I think like what you're doing is amazing. And I just knew you'd be a great addition on one of my episodes and helping other event pros not only learn a little bit, just the event part of a big iconic event, which we'll get to in a moment, but also the career aspect and how to get involved. And you're really good at doing that. In one of your many endeavors that you do. So I know we're going to talk about the Paris Olympics, which was about a year ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, gosh, it's crazy how time's flown. But yes, I was indeed involved with the Olympics. Not actually on the ground with the committee, but I was involved in a more of a hospitality program with one of the top 10 sponsors. So a slightly different insight, perhaps, but hopefully one that will be interesting for your audience.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I did that at the 2012 Olympics. It was my very first event, the Olympics. So it's an event that's like quite near and dear to my heart. And I feel like, I call major events, mega events, I call them iconic events. And I think that the Olympics is the most iconic of them all. It's long. People are on the ground for a long time. There's so many different facets of it. And you mentioned a hospitality program. So could you explain what is a hospitality program at a major event?
Yeah, absolutely. A hospitality program is usually involved with the sponsors. So if a brand or a company is sponsoring the Olympics, then they will get a bunch of tickets and they'll want to bring along some of their top clients or maybe potential clients or key stakeholders within the business or external, and essentially woo them and schmooze them and show them a great time. So that's where we come in.
Really cool. And who did you, I don't think you work directly through the Olympic Committee. There's a lot of different players involved with an event like the Olympics. So how did you get involved in a hospitality program?
Yeah, it's actually a really funny story, and I love that. I love this about events, and I think kind of circling back to what you mentioned earlier, when I studied events management, and all of my classes, it would somehow link back to the Olympics. And I think for us, or maybe for other people that have studied event management, it is definitely portrayed to be sort of the event of all events. So I always had it on my bucket list just because I like to dream big. And I remember just feeling really inspired and thinking it was really cool. And I also think my dad was probably quite influenced by the London 2012 and just thought it would be a really fun event for me to get involved in. So he always kind of encouraged me as well. I grew up in France, so I'm half, well, I'm not half French, but the French don't know I'm English. So for me, when I saw that the Olympics were taking place in Paris, I just thought, what an absolutely brilliant opportunity to get involved. And so this was kind of, the date had been announced, the city had been announced. And I remember I was working on a job in Abu Dhabi, actually, very randomly. I sort of a job that someone had recommended me for. And one of the ladies that I worked with, she'd said that she'd worked on a lot of Olympics. And I remember saying to her, oh, do you mind recommending a couple of companies? So she did. She recommended a bunch of different companies who all work in and around the Olympics, not the committee itself. So I remember just applying. And it was actually, just to also give a realistic insight, I was interviewing for that job for probably honestly over a year and a half. I went through multiple rounds of interviews. I do remember being really, really keen. So I'd emailed them and I was like, I really want to get involved. I know it's still early doors. So I'd done sort of an initial call, and then I think their HR team changed. So I did a call with their other HR person. And then they put me on to do an interview with the project director and the project manager. So it was a long one in the sort of pipeline for me, that one.
I love that. I love that you just covered like so many different parts of working at a major event. The bigger it is, or the bigger the gap is in between, the longer the lead time. An annual event you usually try to get involved about 9 months before, but the Olympics is about 2 years before, isn't it?
Yes,
It's
so it
busy.
is definitely something to be patient with, and these things don't happen overnight, and you do have to. I remember putting out quite a lot of feelers with a lot of different companies just because I thought I speak fluent French, so surely I'll be offered a job that will be interesting and relevant and where I can use my skills. So yeah, pleased that I was patient with that one because it did pay off in the end.
Really cool. Amazing. What was your role in a hospitality program? Because I think with hospitality, we automatically assume food and drink, but I work in hospitality sometimes and I know there's a lot more to it than food and drink.
No one would trust me with food and beverage. It's not my forte, not because I would eat it all, although that would be tempting. I am not, that would not be for me. So my role was guest experience manager. So I do remember, I'd obviously never done that role before, and I do remember thinking, oh god, what does that actually entail? Because that feels like quite a broad title that could have meant different things, and perhaps different companies call those roles slightly differently. But in our team, the sort of main structure was we had a project director who was very client facing, a project manager who was very team facing. And then we had a couple of key people, sort of guest comms, so liaising, and I think she started months and months before, so emailing potential guests, recording who said yes, recording things like dietary requirements, in the lead up, explaining what to pack, what to expect, sorting out tickets. We had a ticketing manager. That was a really, really key role because things are moving, things are changing, and we had a whole bunch of different tickets for a bunch of different games, so that was quite a key role. We also had a transport manager, so my role was more, and we had a hotel manager as well. So my role was kind of in between hotel and everything to do with the activation that we had at the hotel. So they rented out a whole hotel, a gorgeous. I felt so lucky, staying in a 5-star hotel for the whole month of August. It was absolutely insane. So I was kind of working with the hotel manager. So when the guests arrived, any issues, any problems that they had, but most of my responsibility was in the lead up. So I was overseeing some of the production elements for that space takeover. So it was things like branding. Also, I have a background in like marketing, graphics, things like that. So it did kind of make sense that I helped out with that, liaising with the graphics team, getting all of everything has to be approved. So anything to do with the Olympics, if it has that, we called it the Triposit logo. So if that's on it, it has to go through the committee to get approved. So it was quite a vast role, but kind of at any event, you will just end up doing a little bit of everything, running to IKEA and buying 100 cushions and things like that. So there was, lots of different elements, which I really enjoy. And it was I really enjoyed it because I also on site looked after I was sort of the lounge manager in the evening. So when they'd come back, I was on the late night shift. So I didn't actually get to go to any of the games at all. Also a bit of a... a bit of a fun one, but I did actually get to go to one, but we were working a lot, and unfortunately we weren't in the actual games themselves, so we watched it all from a TV screen.
That's, as you were saying that, I felt like it was replaying my own experience. Very similar. We rent out the hotel. I think when I did it, we had maybe 10 hotels. And, when people ask me about my experience at the Olympics, I'm like, well, I stayed in a 4 or 5-star hotel, like a very nice hotel for 1 month. So I don't know if that's typical or not, but I think if you work in a hospitality program, it must be typical.
Yeah.
I actually got to go to a few events. Went to the trampoline gymnastics final. Who would have ever,
who would have known it was a sport in the Olympics?
Never knew. I know now, and it was really fun. But that was such a good description of what a hospitality program's like. And what was your favorite part of this kind of job? Because I think it's so similar to what we would do in a normal, 3-day event, but it's also so different because you're basically living somewhere.
Oh, that's a really good question. I think my highlight was probably because the guests were sort of out during the day, they'd be taken to restaurants, experiences, games. They'd sort of come back to the hotel between 9:30, 10, 11, and then it would be open till 1 a.m. And I think my favourite part was really just speaking with the guests, because if you can imagine the calibre of people they're just all really, really intelligent, interesting, well-travelled people. So obviously my role, it's always a very fine line, I find, in those sort of situations. And I like to hope I'm quite good at reading the room. And some people, they might be a bit lonely sometimes, or I can tell they're maybe a bit apart from the group, or there are certain people that will want to engage and they want to have a chat and they genuinely are just interested. And so it's always that fine line of not being over the top and sort of jumping into conversations when they're having an important business conversation. But I had some really, really great chats. And actually, off the back of someone that I met, he used to work for BP, and we got talking about investing, and we really spoke for quite a long time, and he gave me all his best tips. And then the next day I went, and I just remember I was like, I'm gonna go do it. I'm gonna look into it. And that was the first time I'd ever bought investments in a company. And I genuinely think if it wouldn't have been for that conversation, I probably wouldn't have done it there and then. So sometimes it's not necessarily the things that you would expect. And for me, even just being back in Paris, it was very nostalgic. I grew up in France, so I spent over a decade living there, and I lived in Paris when I was 18. So just being back in Paris, connecting with lots of friends. I had quite a few other friends that work on the Olympics as well. It was just the atmosphere. So yeah, there were definitely lots of highlights.
That's so cool. I do love the atmosphere, because I remember in London, everywhere you went, there was just reminders of the Olympics everywhere, and I just liked seeing how people dress and their, fancy dress and wearing their country flags around their shoulders. I quite like that part of
It was really fun. This year, I don't know whether it was like trending or something. I think Snoop Dogg wore a pair of sunglasses with the rings, and it was spreading. We had a pair in the office, and it was just really funny yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said about the atmosphere that comes with any sporting event. And I think that's what's quite different about, in the past, I've done a lot of live music events, whereas I think when people are bonding over something like sport, it really is such a great atmosphere, and it's so different and distinct to a concert or a festival or something like that.
Oh yeah, we'll have to maybe talk about concerts and festivals a little bit because those are all really good insights, and it's just diverse, types of events that you can work on. So you mentioned being able to read the room really well. What skills came in really handy when you were working at the Olympics?
I think that, yeah, it's definitely an important skill. Is to there were only 15, 20 guests at a time, so really every single guest is hyper important. It's not like you've got 1,000 people coming and one or two might not have the best time. Like, every single person really had to have the best time. And I think there are different types of personalities and even just different moods. Somebody who might be really chatty one day, you can kind of tell that the next day maybe something's happened, they're stressed, and you might not want to approach them in the same way. And I think that's a really important skill with the guests, but also with the team, is just being able to recognize different people have different skills and different ways of working. And I think just sort of trying to dial in and tap into emotional intelligence, and that just goes such a long way. I think at the end of the day, a lot of the work in itself that I was doing was nothing extraordinary. If you're organized and you've worked in events before, I realistically think that most people could have done that job more or less easily. But I think what set me apart potentially is, yeah, just I think my biggest skill, which is a bit of a weird one, but it's people skills. And it's so hard for that to put that on a CV, and it's not just people skills in, I'll chat to anyone. It's being able to adapt for different people and really understand what it is they're trying to get out. And maybe just to give an example, like for instance, there was one gentleman who I could just tell he wasn't super outgoing. I think he was from Sweden, he was from a different country, and I don't think he knew anyone there. So he was a little bit, I could just tell he was a little bit lonely, to be honest. And so I chatted with him for a little bit, and it's how you go above and beyond. And I did a work placement when I was younger at Disney World, and I think this is just ingrained in me that you have to go above and beyond and just make everyone's experience magical. And we were talking, and he was saying, I don't come to Paris often. I've never been before. He was, I just love to see the Eiffel Tower before we go. And I said, if you're going to the Eiffel Tower, I knew that it was all closed off for the game. So I said, don't bother going to the Champ de Mars, which is like where it's located. I said, go to this street. I'll send you a pin. I kind of knew that that's where people always go to get photos. It's a really nice, typical Parisian street where it looks down and then the Eiffel Tower comes. So I said, go at this time. And it'll be amazing. So it's just little things like that. But he sent a really lovely message afterwards, and he really appreciated it. And so it's always just thinking how you can go that extra mile, whether it's having an umbrella planned or making sure that your catering is really inclusive, or it just goes a long way.
Yeah, I think people skills are the most important because any kind of technical skill you can learn as you go.
Or
People skills
delegate.
goes a long way, especially working or just being around other people from different countries. And I'm from the US, and a lot of people in the US have never really been around other cultures. We have our own cultures in the US, but that's one thing that I'm thankful for living in the UK. We're just exposed to a lot more here. And a lot of the events that I'm at here, there's so many different people from other countries. That's a skill set itself, just understanding how different countries are, and like some are a bit more reserved and some they're there to have a really good time, and some are more focused on business. And I'm glad you brought that up because people often forget about the people skills, or they don't really know what it means. And
Mm.
yeah, I love all the points that you brought up. So maybe a controversial question. What was your least favorite thing about working at the Olympics? Was it being away from home, or there's so many, or was it like long days? Everybody's going to have something they don't like.
Yeah, of course, it's long days, it's stressful, it's hard work. I just come out of a really big project where I was working with Microsoft, so I do remember it being quite a chaotic point to take on a new contract that was also quite demanding, because I guess also I run Electric Cat and Nowie, so my marketing agency and the network of women in events is all happening in the background. So it is, for me, it's always about that juggling game. I mean, I feel incredibly lucky that we have incredible teams in both businesses, that it's not, I'm not the one doing the day-to-day of everything in Electric Cat or Nowie, thank goodness, because it just wouldn't be possible. So I think it, for me, it's that feeling pulled in lots of different directions, and when the emotion kick in because you're tired and it's very high energy to be talking to people all day long. So even for me, for someone who's quite outgoing and talkative, it does drain me. And I think long hours, it was extremely hot. I don't know if anyone remembers last August. It's nothing like this August. And my mum lives in France as well, so I was trying to make time to see my mum, and it's I'm just feeling pulled in lots of different directions. And also, just for kind of context, so the business program usually runs for 2, maybe 3 days. So for us, it was kind of like Groundhog Day. So every 2-3 days we'd get a new wave, and for each wave we'd have to really turn up with that same energy that we had for wave 1. And as someone who relishes in the new and the unknown and I'm a very top of funnel person. So for me to be in that day to day and knowing that I'm going to have to repeat what I just did over the last few days again and again and again 14 times is just not maybe best suited to my personality. I am more of a ideation, new ideas, bringing things together. So when it comes to delivering all the way down the bottom of that sort of funnel, if you will, I personally find that challenging. It's something that I'm learning about myself. I don't think I had that sort of understanding a couple of years ago, but yeah, any event is going to be super stressful, especially abroad, in working with new teams, working with a new hotel. So it was challenging, but it was extremely rewarding at the same time.
Oh, such a good point that you just brought up. Maybe it's because I just finished being on site for a month and it was like that. It was Groundhog Day for the last 14 days. And then it's towards the end, you get new athletes coming and you're like, I've already been doing this over and over and over. And you just have to have the same enthusiasm for someone coming to compete for their first day. And that does take a toll because you almost lose, you just lose any sense of, there's time distortion, there's, and I think like when you have waves of people coming and you build a relationship with them really fast and then you have to restart it, that's really,
Yeah.
that's tiring. And it's so funny because somebody said, I don't know where you get your energy from. And I was like, you don't see me when I'm at home, because that kind of event will take a lot out of you, and then it takes a long time to recover. So I'm glad you brought that point up because I can, relate to it. And I wasn't at the Olympics recently, but I was at another long event, and that is true of major events. And speaking of major events, what do you see is like your top tips if somebody wants to get involved with something like the Olympics or just another really well-known, well-established event? Because they're often the ones that people say, I have no idea how to get involved in anything like that.
Yeah, I would just say ask in your network people that you know that have worked at these events. Who did you work for? Just go and stalk their LinkedIn. Just go find out for yourself. And after a while, you'll get to. I think you really do have to, plan ahead, as we were saying earlier. Don't leave it until a couple of months before. But equally, you never know, because sometimes those are the best opportunities is when someone else drops out. I've had my best jobs because someone else has dropped out that were clearly more senior, and everyone else that was more senior is clearly not available. So they've kind of they've taken a chance on me, which I've been incredibly grateful for in the past. But looking at suppliers is another really good one. So, for instance, it could be Yeah, any of the suppliers. For instance, I don't know, I'm just thinking to that now. One of our partners are Arena, and they supply all of the temporary infrastructure, so seating, things like that. That would be a great way to get in. Looking at even crew companies that will be out there, or internet. One of my friends went and worked for a technology company called PMY, and they supply overlay and internet and technology solutions. So there's a lot of different ways. In catering companies might be another one. um I wouldn't know much about applying through the committee itself. I think that is a little bit more complicated because, to my understanding, quite a lot of the same people do the same roles year on year and kind of travel around. So it's a bit harder to get in. But if you can get in, then that's a really good in, almost for life, really. I think if you do well, then you will probably get more work. So yeah, looking at the sponsors, looking at the production companies around it, like the one that I worked for, and looking at the suppliers as well.
Amazing. And I'd also say I think the teams, because there's your country teams and also the individual sports associations too. I
Mm,
know a lot of people work through that. They all pay very different. There's all very different
yeah.
kinds of contracts. So there's never, one way and one kind of experience. How would you say working at the Olympics? I'd say, how did it help your career? But I know you have a company as well. How do you think it helps? Or did it help? Maybe it didn't. Maybe it's completely like a separate kind of thing that you did.
Well, it came at a bit of an interesting time. I've been doing less and less freelancing and doing more and more work with Electric Cat. So we're kind of at a bit of a crossover point. And the Olympics was actually the last big event that I worked on. I haven't done many events since. Well, no, actually, that's a lie. I did do a Christmas event, but other than those two, I haven't really done many events. But I would say it's one for the CV. It's one that really stands out. I think it adds gravitas. And although we're doing marketing now, it's still very much for event suppliers and event organisers. So I think it does come with a bit of kudos. I like to, you got to make the most. For me, obviously financially, it was a good event. I made a decent pay from it, which was nice. But equally, I met a really good friend who I still see regularly. So there's lots of different, and like that story about how I met the guest who got me into investing. I think there's always incredible things that will come from an event, and it's not necessarily always financial, or it's not always necessarily a monumental, huge, oh my god, that led to this. But actually, sometimes it's the smaller wins that you take away and that are the most impactful.
Definitely. I even think that at a big event, if a lot of people who don't work in the event industry work at major events simply because they just need thousands of people. And a lot of people do that as, a really good experience for them. It does add gravitas because you could be interviewing for a job in like a medical field. And as soon as somebody sees, the Olympics on your CV, it just becomes a talking point.
Mm.
And I think
Yes, yeah.
it helps you in that way. And it's
Kind of
little
like
things.
Disney, like kind
Yeah,
of how when I worked at Disney when I was younger, and I think when you do those bigger projects, that kind of takes over. And I wouldn't really talk about that as much anymore. But there are definitely, by being able to say that you've worked for some of these big brands, it gives a lot of confidence to some of those smaller companies as well. Because, like you say, it's such a unique event in that it takes up the whole of the city, the resources required, and sort of the global spotlight on the stage is never quite is unparalleled. So to have an understanding of that is definitely going to mean that you've got some great learnings and experience, which will definitely be valuable somewhere somehow.
definitely. I totally agree. And now I'm really curious. So you worked at Disney. Your last event was the Olympics. Last big event. I know you've done festivals in between there. What does your career journey look like?
If you've ever heard the term squiggly career, I didn't coin it, but I am embodying it. Again, kind of going back to like, that's just how I've always been. I love new things and I love doing different things all the time. That's kind of what stimulates me. I definitely know that about myself. And I just remember going to the, like when I first signed up to the gym where I lived, and I remember they were like, I said, "Oh, what classes are good?" And she said, "Well, how will you know? If you should just try them all." And I thought that's a really good idea. So I just kind of went and like tried every class. That was quite funny actually. That's another story. But I just think I've done the same with events in my career. People have said, "What do you want to do?" And I've never known. And I still to this day I joke. I'm like, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, because that's what I enjoy is the new. And actually, even though they're so different, the events, there is so much in common, and I've learned so much from every single event that I've worked on, and it's so transferable. But what I would say is that it's definitely good to start in festivals and work your way up to corporate, because then it feels like a breeze. If you start in corporate and then decide to go into festivals, you will be in for quite a shock.
Why is that? I'm going to be honest. I've never even really been to a festival in the way that I think about it, like a music festival. I've never been.
Well, what I would say is that the resources are a lot more scarce, that usually the budgets are way tighter, and you find yourself, but that's what I love about festivals is I think when you have your back up against a wall, that's when you become your most creative, resourceful. I see that with big companies, people that are used to having a whole marketing team, and oh, send the graphics to that person, they're the graphics person. Oh, accounts, they will deal with the accounts and the finances. Oh, we have a legal team who develop our contracts. When you run your own business, you have to be all of those things. And I think it's the same at events. If you can really start by doing a lot with a little and making your budgets go a long way, you become so much more resourceful. And actually, in the corporate world, people aren't as used to that. So when you can come with really creative, budget friendly, resource saving solutions, they really appreciate it, because they're a bit more used to going, okay, well, there's £5,000 in the budget for that, and there's 20 grand in the budget for table centers. And it's just insane, some of the things that I've seen done, like just like a silly example, but when we were on the Olympics, we needed a solution for crew washing. And I remember we were getting these different quotes, and it was insane. The hotel we were staying in were trying to charge us like €5 a garment. So if you had so a wash would be like 50 quid a person, and there were 30 of us, and it was just insane, like the laundry bill. And I just remember being like, why don't we just use this app? There's an app that comes and they collect your laundry, and then it's like laundry heap, and it's like £10 a wash, £20 maybe. And it's just like, those are the things that when you think outside the box, you can kind of come up with solutions. Whereas if you're used to doing things the same way time and time again, then you become a bit less flexible, I guess.
Oh, good points. But I can imagine, especially working in something like a festival, because you're out in the elements as well.
Yes.
It's so funny. I've never been to one, and I think festival culture in the UK is really big, and they're like, "You've never been to a festival?" Like, nope, I've never been. I can imagine maybe what it's like to work there. But really good. I think that's a really good starting point, like you said. Really good advice. I have to ask, what is your favorite festival you've worked on or concert? It's a fun
Ooh.
question.
Oh, that's really tough. I have done a lot, but I guess the one that always comes to mind, I guess one in the UK that I do really love, very controversial, but Boomtown. I think it's amazing. I just love the theatricals. I love the storyline. I just think the production is insane. I've seen a few talks from some of the organisers, and the level of work that goes into that festival is insane. But probably the number one would have to be, I worked at a festival in Costa Rica called Envision. It was just before COVID, but it was the best festival I've ever been to. Everything was all natural. They were very, very eco-friendly. Like, you weren't allowed to take bottled shampoo and meat products and things like that. It was very, very all natural. Everything was done through permaculture. So throughout the year, and the positive impact they leave with their communities. And there were workshops, yoga, the stages, the production on the stages were insane. The sunrises on the beach were just something out of a film. And funny enough, a friend that I met there just came to stay at mine the other day. So yeah, you just never know who you're going to meet and how, because that was like 5 years ago now. So how it all comes together in the end.
I love that. Yeah, all the people you meet. I My favorite thing about events is the people I get to work with because they become
Absolutely.
friends. Well, so many good insights about the Olympics and other events, and just as what did you call it? A squiggly career.
The
I love,
squiggly cover. That is a
love it.
podcast. Check it out.
You should trademark that. I really like that. And I'm sure that all the people listening are going to love all your insights. And I've had so much fun chatting with you, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. So I'm going to wrap up this episode of the Iconic Events Series. That's a wrap on this episode in the Iconic Events Series. And a huge thank you to Cat for joining and giving all of her insights on working at events like the Olympics and festivals. If you loved today's episode, please leave a review, like, follow, and share it with other event pros who are dreaming of working at iconic events. And don't forget to connect with Cat. Her details are in the show notes. And stay tuned because I have more guests lined up to pull back the curtain on the world of iconic events. Remember to connect with me on Instagram at Laura Lloyd Events and A Flair on YouTube at Laura Yarbrough Lloyd, and on LinkedIn, I'm the only Laura Yarbrough Lloyd. I'll see you next time when you undoubtedly will have a little bit more flair for VIP events. And remember, you're going to enter your iconic events era. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.